The truck's headlights were two weak coins in a world of white. Snow didn't fall so much as it came sideways, blown flat across the windshield in sheets that made the glass look like it had been sandblasted. The wipers fought and lost again, smearing slush into milky streaks that turned the mountain pass into a tunnel with no walls. On the dashboard, a plastic ornament dangled from a cracked string. Cheap, bright, out of place. A little Santa with one arm missing, tapping the windshield every time the tires hit a ridge of ice. It was the only reminder that this night was supposed to be warm, supposed to be safe, supposed to mean something other than work. The radio meant nothing tonight. It sat in its bracket like a dead thing, its screen dark, its speakers silent, except for a faint hiss that came and went like it couldn't decide whether it was alive. The driver kept her eyes on the road, and her hands steady at 10 and 2, gloves stiff with cold, breath fogging the inside of the cab. Ahead, the lead security vehicle was just a vague shape, a set of red taillights fading in and out through the whiteout. Behind, somewhere in the storm, a pickup kept distance it couldn't afford to close. The convoy was minimal, 3 vehicles stretched out by necessity, because visibility and ice punished anything tighter. The road itself was a narrow scar carved into the mountain. On the left, a steep slope climbed up into drifting pines and rock. On the right, the ground fell away into a ravine that the snow had half filled, making the drop look deceptively soft, like you could slide into it and be fine, like it wasn't a mouth waiting to swallow metal and men. The driver's name was Mara, though almost nobody used it. In the yard, most people called her driver like it was a title and a boundary. She didn't correct them. Her engine coughed as the tires hit a drift, and the front end surged sideways a fraction. The cab shivered. For a moment, the roar of the wind thinned, as if the storm inhaled. The world went oddly quiet. An unnatural silence cut. Engine stumbling, traction gone, and everything exposed. And the first shot arrived. It wasn't loud the way people imagine gunfire to be. Not a movie crack. It was a hard, clean sound that seemed to come from everywhere because the snow carried it strangely, like the mountain itself had snapped a branch. The lead vehicle's windshield blossomed white, then red. The taillights jerked left. Tires screamed on ice. The vehicle spun and slammed sideways across the road, blocking the single lane like a thrown door. Mara's stomach dropped. Her foot came off the gas. The truck rolled forward on momentum, and she forced it to stop without locking up, steering into the rut, trying not to fishtail. She could see the lead vehicle's rear quarter panel now, half buried already as snow slapped against it. A second shot came, then a third, faster. The spacing that had felt prudent seconds ago now felt like a trap. Behind her, the pickup's engine rose, trying to close distance, trying to do what every escort doctrine said to do when contact hit. Compress the convoy, create mutual support. The pickup's headlights appeared in her mirrors, bright and shaking then. A dull thump, not a crack, and a burst of snow exploded up from the road beside it. An RPG slammed into a snowbank at the pickup's front quarter, the blast flipping the vehicle like it was a toy. It rolled once, skidded, and landed on its side in the shallow ditch, wheels spinning uselessly in the air. Mara ducked automatically as fragments rattled off her truck. She threw the cab door open and slid behind it, using the heavy metal as cover. The wind hit her like a fist. Snow filled her eyelashes instantly. The world smelled like cold and burn powder. Up on the slope to the left, muzzle flashes stuttered through the white, brief orange pinpricks that vanished as soon as they appeared. They were spaced, disciplined, not panicked, not random. Someone had chosen angles, distances, fields of fire. This wasn't a bandit snatch. This was an ambush designed by people who understood geometry. She reached for her handheld radio, thumbed the button. Convoy 3. Contact, the speaker hissed, then died in the same breath. The screen went blank. She tried again, changing channels, checking the battery, pressing harder like force could fix it. Nothing. No bass. No air. No reply. The kind of dead that wasn't weather interference. The kind of dead that felt clean. Ahead, the security detail in the lead vehicle began to dismount. Two men spilled out into the gale, rifles up, moving low. One took 2 steps and dropped hard, his legs folding under him. The other grabbed his vest and dragged him behind the wrecked hood, boots skidding on ice, breath punching out like smoke. They were pinned. The road was open, flat, exposed. Every attempt to move drew fire. Snow made distances lie. You thought something was far and it was close, thought something was close and it was far. The enemy used it like a curtain, firing when wind shifted, holding when it thickened. The storm wasn't just cover for them. It was a tool. Mara's mind went quiet in a way she didn't expect. Not calm like comfort, calm like focus. A narrowing, a stripping away. She peeked around the edge of the door. Through the swirling white she saw silhouettes higher on the slope. Dark shapes moving with purpose, kneeling, standing, passing something hand to hand. One carried an antenna-like stick that looked wrong against the natural lines of rock and pine. A radio operator, maybe a jammer. The thought was sharp and unpleasant. Then something strange happened. A burst of enemy fire raked the road near the security men. Close, too close. Then the next burst walked wide, as if the shooter's hands had been pushed. Another shot snapped, aimed at the prone wounded man, and it missed by a full body length. That didn't happen by accident at this range, not with disciplined shooters. It was like someone was editing the ambush from somewhere else. Mara's eyes flicked back up the slope, searching for another muzzle flash, another angle. She couldn't see it. The snow ate everything. An enemy silhouette appeared briefly on the ridge, more upright than the others, arm raised, gesturing. The cadence of fire shifted immediately. More bursts, then a pause, then a different rhythm. It looked like command, like control. Mara heard shouting through the wind, short, clipped phrases, not the frantic yelling of amateurs. And she realized with a cold certainty that this attack had been rehearsed. Then the hook tore open tonight. 3 enemy shapes on the slope dropped in quick succession. Not slipping, not tripping, dropping like they'd been unplugged. One pitched forward, face first into snow. Another spun and tumbled down the incline, leaving a smeared trail of red that vanished under fresh powder. The third fell backward, arms flailing once before stillness took him. No one near them had fired. The muzzle flashes weren't from their own line. The shots that took them came from somewhere unseen, higher, maybe or off to the side, an angle the ambushers hadn't accounted for. Mara stared, heart hammering, trying to find the shooter. She turned, looking back into the blizzard behind the convoy. There was nothing but white and wind. And then, for a heartbeat, a shape resolve on a higher slope, someone moving with purpose, low and fast, using the storm like it belonged to them. The security men below didn't know what had happened. They just felt the pressure ease for half a breath, like the enemy's grip had loosened. Mara's radio remained dead in her hand, and the storm kept coming. Hours earlier, daylight had never really arrived. The sky over the forward base had been a flat gray lid, the sun a rumor behind thick cloud. Snow fell sideways across the motor pool, making every vehicle look like a rounded mound. People moved like ghosts between buildings, shoulders hunched, breath streaming, their voices muffled by the weather. Inside the briefing room, someone had tried to be festive. A paper wreath taped crookedly to the wall. A string of lights that only half worked. A pot of coffee that tasted like burnt metal. Men swapped holiday stories in low voices, talking about kids and warm kitchens and a world that seemed far away. Mara sat in the back with a clipboard and a pen, silent, listening without joining. She wasn't unfriendly. She just didn't spin words unless they mattered. It made people misread her. Quiet became invisible, and invisible became underestimated. When the mission brief came up on the projector, it was simple on paper. Deliver sealed cases to an isolated sensor outpost on the far side of the mountain corridor before the pass closed. The cases were temperature sensitive. They had escort paperwork stamped with authority that made most of the room look away like it wasn't their business. A relay site like that was a small thing until it wasn't. It fed early warning into the network. It told you if something moved where it shouldn't. It told you if a valley had gone silent. In winter, when patrols were limited and roads were treacherous, That network mattered more. Windows tight, the operations officer had said. Weather's supposed to worsen by late afternoon. Get it there and get back. Before dusk or not at all. In the corner, the comms technician, young, tired-eyed, cleared his throat. We've had intermittent interference all week. Thought it was terrain, maybe atmospheric. But it's weird. Most people shrugged. Mountains did that. Weather did that. It was easy to blame nature because nature didn't have motive. Mara didn't shrug. She wrote it down. Outside, she walked her truck the way she always did. Tire chains checked. Fuel lines inspected. Battery connections tightened. She had a small checklist taped inside the driver's door, handwritten, worn at the edges. Ritual, not superstition. Function, fear managed through routine. A security NCO watched her for a moment, then smirked. Relax, he said, half joking. It's Christmas Eve. Nobody's out in this. Mara didn't smile back. She glanced toward the tree line beyond the fence, where snow lay smooth and untouched, except for a faint set of tracks that shouldn't have been there. Not the heavy prints of deer, not the scattered marks of birds. Something linear, intentional. She stepped closer. The tracks led toward an old service road that hadn't been used in winter as far as she knew. There should have been marker flags along that road, bright strips to keep vehicles from sliding off into the ravine. One flag was missing. The pole was there, bare, snapped twig lines beside it where wind shouldn't have reached. She stared at it, feeling something tighten behind her ribs. The NCO followed her gaze. Snow drifts take those all the time, he said. Focus on driving. The dismissal landed exactly where such things always landed. People saw the uniform patch on her shoulder, logistics, and they stopped thinking about what else could be true. Mara nodded like she accepted it. Then she went back to her truck and opened a glove box. Beneath registration papers and spare fuses was a folded document wrapped in plastic and a small cloth patch. No longer issued, edges frayed from being handled too much. She didn't look at it long, just enough to remember why she kept it there and why she didn't talk about it. She checked her medical kit. She checked the old packs she shouldn't need and always carried anyway. She checked batteries like she expected them to fail, swapping in fresh ones, pocketing spares inside her jacket to keep them warm. When the convoy rolled out, the radio test from the lead vehicle sounded thin and delayed. Words came with a slight drag, as if someone was stepping on them. The comms tech in the rear pickup mentioned it, then shrugged it off. Mountains. Weather. Mara didn't say much, but her jaw tightened. As they climbed into the pass, daylight stayed flat and pale. The storm thickened in waves. Visibility collapsed, then returned, then collapsed again. The convoy spread out more than it should have, each driver terrified of sliding into the vehicle ahead. Protocol bent under nature's pressure, and on a distant ridgeline, just before the whiteout swallowed everything, Mara saw a dark smudge too steady to be a tree. She blinked, looked again. Gone. Back in the kill zone, minutes felt like hours. The enemy had layered their fire perfectly for the terrain. A sniper lined higher up, shooting into the road at shallow angles. An RPG team near a boulder, using the rock as a shield and a rest. A machine gun positioned to cut the road in half, forcing anyone who tried to push forward to crawl. The lead vehicle lay sideways across the lane, its engine still running with a sickening sputter, wheels spinning on ice. It blocked escape. Reversing the cargo truck was possible, but the road edge on the right was invisible under drift. One wrong move, and the truck would slide into the ravine, cargo and all. Mara tried her handset again. Dead. She tried the truck's mounted radio. Dead. She tried the emergency satellite device, sealed in the cab, for exactly this kind of thing. It blinked once, then displayed a failure code she didn't need to interpret to understand. Someone was choking the net. Ahead, the security NCO shouted orders over the wind, trying to keep his men oriented. One of them was bleeding fast. The man's thigh had been punched through. Dark blood soaked his pants, steaming in the cold. His face was gray, eyes wide with shock. Tourniquet, someone yelled. Mara didn't wait for permission. She grabbed her medical kit and slid from behind the door, moving low, using the truck's bulk as cover. Fire snapped overhead, slapping the metal. She felt it in her teeth. She reached the wounded man's side and knelt, hands already working. The NCO looked at her like he'd forgotten she existed. "Stay back." "Hold him," Mara said, voice flat and firm. No panic, just instruction. She cinched the tourniquet high and tight, twisting until the bleeding slowed, then stopped. The wounded man gasped, jaw clenched, eyes squeezing shut as pain hit him like a wave. Mara leaned close. "Breathe," she said. "In, out. Stay with me." She felt the moral weight of it in the moment. This wasn't a choice between heroics and safety. It was a choice between saving the only trained rifle in the open and losing him to seconds. Function over fear. Work despite cold hands. As she tightened the band, enemy fire began to probe. Bursts that walked closer to the cargo truck. Not spraying randomly, but measuring distance, pushing pressure toward the cases. They were steering the fight, herding survivors toward the lead vehicle, shaping a capture pocket rather than wiping everyone outright. That was when Mara understood. They wanted something intact, and maybe someone alive. Visibility collapsed in pulses. The storm seemed to breathe. When wind lulled, enemy fire intensified, crisp and accurate. When snow thickened, they paused, repositioned, waited. It felt rehearsed, like they'd studied this mountain's moods and timed their plan to it. Ammo started to go. The security detail burned magazines just to keep heads down. Every time one of them fired, the muzzle flash was a beacon, and return fire came immediately. You couldn't win a volume fight against prepared positions you couldn't see. Mara's truck engine coughed again. A warning light flickered. The cab heater had died, fogging the inside of the glass. Comfort became survival in a way that made her want to laugh and didn't. A second RPG team appeared lower on the slope, closer, riskier, but with better angle on the cargo truck's engine block. They fired not to destroy the cases, but to disable movement, to freeze the convoy in place. Mara heard the enemy through the wind. Short commands coordinated. One word repeated, maybe a call sign, maybe a name. It cut through the storm like a marker. Then she saw it clearly, an antenna shape on a pack up on the ridge, held at a precise angle. A jammer. Now the fight had a center. She looked at the pinned security men, at the dead radio, at the lead vehicle blocking the lane, at the pickup lying on its side in the ditch. She felt time compress around them, the extraction window closing with the daylight. Nobody was coming because nobody was hearing. And somewhere up there, someone unseen had already killed 3 enemies from an angle that shouldn't exist. Mara's breath went slow. She made a decision that didn't feel brave. It felt necessary. She slid back to her truck, pulled the old pack from behind the seat, and checked what was inside like she'd done it 100 times in another life. A compact rifle broken down into components. Spare magazines. A small optic with a battery compartment she'd already warmed in her pocket. A length of cloth tape. A few simple tools. Nothing flashy. Just what worked. The NCO grabbed her arm. "Where the hell are you going?" Mara met his eyes. Snow had stuck to his eyelashes. His face was raw with fear and cold. "Up," she said. "That's suicide." Mara's gaze flicked to the slope, the muzzle flashes, the jammer pack. "Staying here is," she replied. Then she moved. She didn't go up the obvious way. That was where the enemy's rifles were pointed. Instead, she slipped off the road into the shallow ravine line on the right, dropping down behind a bank of drifted snow that hid her from the ridge. The ravine wasn't deep, but it was enough to break sight lines, enough to make her disappear into the storm like a shadow. The blizzard became her cloak and her enemy. It hid her movement, but also erased landmarks, turned every rise into a possible mistake. She navigated by contour memory, by how the slope should feel under her boots, and by wind direction. Gusts came from the north in this corridor, funneled by the pass. She kept them on her cheek like a compass. She moved slowly at first, testing the snow for crust strength, keeping her weight low. A misstep could crack through a drift and make noise, or worse, trap a leg. She wrapped metal parts in cloth to prevent clink. She kept her breathing shallow, so it wouldn't plume too loudly in the cold. Half buried ahead, she found a maintenance culvert entrance she'd noticed earlier at departure. Only now it mattered. It was the checkpoint that confirmed she was on the right line. The missing marker flag hadn't been random. Someone had removed it. Someone had wanted the culvert to be harder to find. Mara's pulse didn't spike. It steadied. The world narrowed further. Cold bit her fingers even through gloves. She flexed them, feeling the stiffness. Her sidearm was a comfort weapon at best out here. The rifle in her pack was the real tool, and she had limited rounds for what she was planning. That constraint sat in her mind like a timer. Her movement was too efficient for a logistics driver. She didn't waste steps. She didn't pause to debate. She checked angles as she climbed, scanning the slope above, the tree gaps, the rock shelves. She moved like she'd done it under fire because she had, once before she learned how quickly reputations could die and how easily a person could be filed away into a quieter job. The wind shifted, thinning the snow for a heartbeat, and she saw the ridgeline. A broken rock shelf jutted out diagonally above the road, a natural overlook that provided a cross angle on the kill zone. It was an impossible position because reaching it required crossing exposed snowfields that any ambusher would assume no one would attempt in contact. Too open, too risky. Mara crossed anyway. She went low, timing her movement with gusts that lifted snow into blinding spray. She crawled when she had to, elbows digging into powder, knees aching. She reached the rock shelf and pressed into its shadow, letting the stone take the wind for her, letting her breath slow. She assembled the rifle with fingers that didn't want to work. Metal was so cold it burned through cloth. The optic lens had begun to ice at the edges. She wiped it with a strip of cloth, careful not to smear. The battery indicator blinked yellow, cold draining power faster than it should. Protocol would say, keep the optic running, trust your gear. The mountain laughed at protocol. Mara adjusted, ready to use iron sights if she had to. She didn't argue with reality. She adapted. From this angle, the kill zone laid out like a diagram. She could see the jammer pack, antenna angled, operator crouched behind rock. She could see the RPG team lower on the slope, tube resting on a knee. She could see a spotter using hand signals, arm chopping the air in precise motions, guiding fire like an orchestra conductor. Force multipliers. She didn't think of them as targets yet. She thought of them as problems that needed to be removed in the correct order. Time pressure wrapped around her. Wind could shift again and reveal her silhouette against the pale sky. A lull could expose her. And down below, the security detail was burning ammo in minutes. Then she heard it. A faint buzz beneath the wind. Not a wasp. Not a bird. Mechanical. Close enough to matter. A small drone. The enemy had expected a counter-shooter, or at least had planned for one. The drone's low hum came and went as it fought the gusts, searching along the ridge for heat, movement, disturbance. Mara's mouth went dry. She pressed deeper into the rock's shadow, still as stone, letting the storm mask her scent and the cold flatten her heat signature as much as it could. She waited for a gust. When it came, she acted. Her first shot wasn't dramatic. It was clean, a timed squeeze between wind pulses. Using the moment, the gust rattled branches and threw snow into the air. The jammer operator jerked and collapsed behind his rock. The antenna dipped, then fell sideways like a snapped reed. Mara didn't watch him die. She relocated immediately, sliding along the rock shelf to a second micro-position behind a different outcrop. She left a decoy, just a strip of cloth visible against stone, to draw return fire. Down below, the security men felt a change they couldn't name. The radio hiss shifted. Not alive, not healthy, but different, less smothered. Mara found the RPG gunner through the swirling white. He knelt, re-aiming at the cargo truck's engine block. His assistant held a second round, ready to reload. Mara fired once. The gunner fell sideways, tube rolling from his hands into the snow. The assistant lunged for it in reflex. Mara fired again. The assistant crumpled, hands still outstretched. 2 problems removed. The enemy reacted fast. They weren't fools. Bursts of fire snapped toward her decoy cloth, chewing rock. Someone had seen the angle. Someone was trying to bracket her position. And then the commander revealed himself, not by stepping into the open, but by changing the pattern. The enemy's fire cadence shifted again. Hand signals became faster. A squad broke from cover and began moving up the slope in a staggered line, climbers using trees and rock to mask their ascent. The drone's buzz sharpened, focusing on her ridgeline. The machine gun lower down moved to a new angle, its line of fire shifting as if to cut off a retreat route. Mid-fight adaptation. Counterhunt. The enemy wasn't just enduring her interference. They were hunting the source. Mara, check her magazines. The cold had stiffened the spring in one. Another had ice crystals forming along the feed lips. Ammo wasn't just limited, it was fragile. She tucked one magazine inside her jacket for a moment, warming it against her body, then swapped it in with numb fingers. Her target ladder tightened. Every shot now had to be worth the cost. She found the hand signal spotter. He was taller than the others, standing slightly higher, confident because he believed he owned the field. Mara waited until the wind thinned just enough. One shot. The spotter fell backward into the snow, arms splayed. The enemy line below hesitated just a fraction. Coordination frayed. Fire became reactive instead of planned. The drone drifted closer, fighting a gust, hovering for a second in a rare wind-stable pocket. Its camera angled down, scanning. It was close enough that Mara could see its shape through the snow, small, dark, purposeful. Her muscles screamed to move, to shoot, to do something. She did nothing. She flattened into a shallow scrape she'd carved in the snow beside the rock. Rifle pulled close, face turned away, breath held. The drone hovered. The seconds stretched. Silence fought violence in her chest. Then the wind slapped it sideways and it drifted on, searching elsewhere. Mara exhaled slowly, careful not to fog the optic. Below, she saw movement near a second antenna pack, jammer backup perhaps, and a figure who carried himself differently. Not because he stood taller, but because people oriented around him. When he shifted, others shifted. When he lifted a hand, the ambush changed. The commander. He stayed behind cover, calm, controlled, letting the storm do half his work. But now he was stepping out, just briefly, to reassert control. Likely because something had gone wrong and he needed to fix it with presence. 2 seconds. Mara's sight picture steadied. Her finger took the slack out of the trigger. The turning shot broke the enemy's cohesion like a snapped spine. The commander jerked, stumbled, and collapsed into the snow. For a heartbeat, the entire ridge line seemed to forget what to do. Hand signals stopped. Bursts became irregular. Shouting replaced discipline. Voices raised in anger, confusion, fear. The kill zone rhythm collapsed. The enemy tried brute force to regain control. Mortar rounds began to land along the road. Not precise enough to annihilate, but close enough to terrify. Snow geysers erupted, throwing ice and rock fragments. The blasts pinned friendlies again, forcing them to flatten behind vehicles and banks. Mara watched the pattern. They weren't trying to level the convoy. They were trying to scare it into surrender without destroying the cargo. Capture pressure now was undeniable. Down below, the security NCO didn't waste the opening. He was good, better than his earlier dismissal. With the commander down and coordination fraying, he pushed a smoke and dash maneuver, throwing smoke canisters into the wind so they spread low across the road. 2 men hauled the wounded back, dragging him by his vest. Another team jammed shoulders into the lead vehicle's rear, trying to shift it just enough to create a narrow reverse lane. The truck behind Mara's old position groaned as gears engaged. The cargo truck began to grind backward inch by inch, tires searching for purchase, exhaust steaming. Mara heard a faint squeak from her radio, so weak she thought she imagined it. Then another. A broken transmission, clipped and distorted, but real. The jammer had been hit. Not fully dead. Backup might still come online, but wounded enough for a location burst to slip through if someone tried hard and got lucky. The enemy tried to adapt again. A heavier weapon appeared lower on the slope, carried by 2 men, something meant to disable engines, to stop the convoy's movement cold. They were committing now. Time was slipping. If the convoy escaped, the entire plan failed, and whoever had ordered this would demand answers. Mara ignored easier targets. She didn't shoot the panicked man sprinting between rocks. She didn't shoot the one who stood up too high and made himself obvious. Those were distractions. Her priorities were the heavier weapon and the jammer backup. She tracked the team, carrying the heavy weapon. Waited for the moment they paused to set it up. One shot, then another. The first man dropped, collapsing onto the weapon. The second tried to drag it free, yanking with desperate strength. Mara's third shot hit him mid-motion. The weapon sank into the snow like it had never mattered. Her rifle's barrel was hot enough now that snow touching it hissed and melted, then refroze. Heat bloom threatened accuracy. Her optic lens iced again at the edges. She stripped off a glove and used her bare thumb to clear it, skin sticking for a second to freezing glass. Pain flared sharp and immediate. Cost paid in real time. She forced the glove back on, hands shaking once, then steady. The enemy climbers were closer now. She could hear them through the storm, boots crunching, branches snapping softly, the faint rattle of gear. They were good. They moved with patience, using the same storm she used. Mara shifted to a new micro-position, sliding along the backside of the rock shelf, leaving a false track line where she'd been. She dropped lower, using the slope to hide her silhouette. She fired on the jammer backup, one man kneeling over it, trying to adjust the antenna, hands moving quickly. One shot. He fell forward, face disappearing into snow. A second cohesion break. The enemy's attempt to smother the net again failed. Below, the convoy finally gained movement. The lead vehicle had been dragged a fraction, enough to open a narrow reverse channel. The cargo truck ground backward, tires biting, slipping, biting again. The survivors from the overturned pickup crawled out, limping along the ditch line, heads down. The security NCO shouted for his men to fall back in bounds, using smoke and the storm to cover. They were withdrawing, not pushing, surviving, not winning. In this terrain, that was victory. Mara's rifle clicked empty. She swapped magazines with hands that felt like wood. The cold and adrenaline had turned her fingers into tools rather than flesh. She glanced down the slope and saw something that made her blood run colder than the wind. A figure in the convoy, huddled behind the cargo truck near the cab, was being watched by enemy eyes in a way that was different. Not just kill them, not even stop them. It was attention like, take that one. A technician, perhaps. Someone riding along with the cargo for access or installation. Someone the enemy wanted alive. It explained the restraint, the selective mortar bracketing, the careful attempt to disable vehicles without destroying cases, the capture pocket formation. This wasn't only about equipment. This was about control of the network and the person who could unlock it. The enemy climbers crested near her last position. A silhouette appeared above the rock, rifle angled down, searching. Mara didn't shoot, not because she couldn't, but because she shouldn't. She was nearly out of rounds, and every shot now risked revealing exactly where she was. She needed to survive long enough to keep pressure off the convoy's withdrawal. She slid down the backside of the slope, using a line of scrub pines as cover, moving with the storm. Her boots sank into powder, making quiet, controlled crunches. She kept her body low, eyes scanning for the next ridge, the next rock, the next place to become invisible again. Below, the convoy continued to reverse out of the kill zone. The sound of engines in the storm was a heartbeat, faint, desperate, alive. Mara felt something like relief threaten her focus, and she crushed it. Relief made people sloppy. A shot cracked above her, enemy firing at a guess position. Snow puffed near her shoulder. She didn't flinch. She moved faster, angling toward the ravine line that had brought her up, now her escape route down. The storm swallowed her. By the time the convoy limped into the outpost yard, night had settled in fully. Floodlights cut cones into the snowfall, turning the air into glittering chaos. Vehicles rolled and scarred, windows cracked, panels peppered. Men climbed out stiffly, faces hollow, eyes unfocused from adrenaline and cold. The holiday lights taped in the briefing room felt like a cruel joke now. Medics rushed forward, pulling the wounded onto stretchers. The man Mara had tourniqueted earlier was pale but alive, his breath shallow, his hand clenching at nothing. The security NCO gave a terse casualty count to the operations officer. The numbers weren't celebrated. They were carried like weight. Victory was survival, not triumph. Mara arrived later than the convoy, slipping in through the edge of the yard like she belonged to the snow more than the base. Someone spotted her and shouted. 2 soldiers jogged out, guiding her in, hands ready in case she collapsed. She didn't. She just handed over her rifle without ceremony and let the adrenaline drain in slow waves that made her knees feel hollow. In the debrief room, heat hit her like dizziness. People removed gloves, rubbed hands, stared at the table. The operations officer looked up as if seeing her for the first time. "Ow," he began, then stopped, choosing words. "How did it drive her?" Mara didn't answer immediately. Not because she didn't want to, but because she had learned that explanations often cost more than action. The security NCO, to his credit, spoke first. "She saved us," he said simply. His voice was hoarse. "She broke their jammer, took out their launcher teams, dropped their leader." He swallowed. "We'd be dead or captured if she hadn't moved." The room shifted. Skepticism loosened. Respect edged in, cautious and real. Mara reached into her jacket and pulled out the folded document from her glove box, still wrapped in plastic. She placed it on the table. Then the small cloth patch, frayed at the edges. No melodrama, no speech, just proof. A silence settled that was different from storm silence. This was human silence, the kind that comes when people realize they've been wrong about someone for a long time. The operations officer unfolded the document carefully. His eyes scanned it, then lifted to hers. "You never said," he murmured. Mara's shoulders rose and fell. "Nobody asked," she replied. The comms technician, same one who'd mentioned interference all week, cleared his throat. "We pulled what we could from the gear we recovered," he said, pushing a few items across the table in an evidence bag. A broken antenna housing, a handheld radio with markings scratched off, a notebook damp at the edges. The notebook held short entries, timing notes, weather observations, a crude sketch of the pass and the convoy's likely spacing. A plan, not an impulse. They've been testing the interference, the technician said, voice tight, for days, seeing how fast we reacted, seeing if anyone noticed. Mara felt that tighten behind her ribs again. The dark smudge on the ridgeline, the missing marker flag, the snapped twig line, the week-long weird comms, a pattern people had dismissed because the storm made everything easy to blame on nature. The cargo was finally opened under supervision in a heated storage bay. Inside the sealed cases were sensitive relay components, small, ruggedized modules meant to keep the early warning network alive through winter. Encryption hardware, calibration units, the kind of equipment that didn't look like much until you realized what went blind without it. A technician stood nearby, arms crossed over his chest, face drawn with shock. He'd ridden along because installation required more than plugging in a box. The enemy had watched him in the kill zone. They'd wanted him alive, access and capability in one human package. Seize the modules, take the technician, and you didn't just steal equipment. You stole the ability to see. The motive snapped into place cleanly. "Why Christmas Eve?" the operations officer asked quietly, more to the room than to her. "Lower staffing," the security NCO said. "People relax. Assume nobody's moving in this weather." "And predictable convoy patterns," the comms tech added. "They chose the storm because it makes us blame the mountains for their jamming." Mara looked at the paper wreath on the wall, the half-working lights. Something in her chest hardened. Not anger. Something colder. Understanding. The commander they'd lost in the past hadn't been a brute. He'd been competent, intentional, that made him more dangerous than any screaming fanatic. This had been a planned propaganda win and a capability grab. Test response time, seize network modules, capture the tech, vanish into the white while the base argued with dead radios. They'd almost succeeded. The room settled into the quiet aftermath that comes after a near disaster. People drank bitter coffee. Someone wrapped a blanket around the wounded man's shoulders. The security NCO rubbed his eyes with the heel of his hand like he could erase what he'd seen. Mara sat at the edge of the table, hands wrapped around a paper cup she didn't drink. Her fingers were raw under the gloves, skin cracked from cold, and from the moment she'd stripped a glove to clear ice from glass. Pain pulsed faintly now that adrenaline had faded. The operations officer leaned forward. "You were what, exactly?" he asked, careful. "And the operation ended."